Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Good morning and welcome. Today is May 19, and guess what? It's 27 degrees here in Lagos, Nigeria. I wonder what it is where you're taking us this morning, Maupe.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the temperature is in Kebbi State. In Abuja here, it's 26 degrees. I want to imagine also that the temperature is calming down somewhat in the capital of Kebbi State, which is burning Kebbi. Well, this morning we are taking you to a particular road of interest. So if you are in Kebbi State and you're watching us from there, we bring you this skyline all the way from burning Kebbi. It's called the Haliru Audu Road in Kebbi State. You can see the Y. It's yeah, the road of the Y. It's got a little roundabout in the middle, and then you can see it, branching out in two places and then converging at a roundabout and then continuing along that line. I haven't been to Kebbi, so I can't precisely tell you where all of these roads are leading, but we understand that this is a major road, a major transportation route within the capital of the state, and in recent times it's just gotten a facelift. So we can see that in some parts of it it's been resurfaced, and then street lights have been put on them. So also have the drainage been redone. So in recent times it's come under focus for repair and maintenance, and I think maybe that's why we can get this really good view that we're getting this morning. It doesn't look from here that I can see any potholes, but I don't know. Ayo, can you cite any potholes along this road?
Well, don't forget that we are looking at the skyline, so I doubt we'll be able to see that right now. However, it doesn't look like there is any. And one thing that stands out for me about this thing that we're looking at right now is that Kebbi is in northwestern Nigeria. And let me emphasize again, if you had in your head somewhere that the northern Nigeria is a poor-looking state and all of that, well, look at the vegetation, look at the infrastructure in the state, in this particular state, and in various parts of the state, of the northwestern region. And you can be sure that it's not really what we thought. It's not a poor place. So then the question arises as to why there is such a report that we got in 2022, which we don't have an alternative to yet, of such humongous numbers of multidimensional poverty in the northern part of the country, with Sokoto State being one of the so-called the highest number of people in Nigeria with that. So questions, Mark. But hey, enough of politics. Let's just enjoy this view of Kebbi State in northwestern Nigeria.
Well, while it is that we focus on Haliru Audu Road in Kebbi State, we also do know that President Bola Tinubu left the country over the weekend to attend the inauguration of Pope Leo XIV, the new Catholic pontiff. That happened yesterday morning. And of course, as you might imagine, almost all of the dailies are washed with photos of the president shaking hands with the pontiff. It's quite interesting that this has happened. And for those who know some of the backstory, they'll tell you that initially the thought was brought up of, I think, sending a representative because the president isn't Christian. But at the end of the day, I think the president decided to honor that particular invitation. And there were quite a number of interesting things that were said as to the significance of the president visiting the pontiff. I mean, of course, the Catholic Church is always very open and it has a policy of tolerance and also of fellowship with other faiths, as it were. So I don't think that for the fact that the president is Muslim would have stood in the way, but I think it was particularly important for the president to also say that, much as he is Muslim, he's also president of the many Christians, in particular Catholics, that were very interested in the inauguration of Pope Leo. Actually very glad about the inauguration of Pope Leo the 14th. So yes, I think it is important, and I think it is worthy in a country that is oftentimes torn like ours along religious lines, sometimes needlessly. It is important, that moments like this be put up, and we understand the significance of this. Your question would be, if it was happening the other way, and the president was Muslim, would it also happen the other way? I mean, just asking. I don't know if there's a world leader for Muslims, but assuming a world leader for Muslims has been inaugurated, I want to imagine that if world leaders generally are being invited for that event, it wouldn't matter the religion of a leader. But at the end of the day, I think what is important is that what we must continue to underline are the values and the tenets that unite us across the different faiths, rather than the things that divide us. And for those who are usually at various extremes, I think at this moment is particularly significant. Ayo, what's your take? You were here commenting very strongly on the inauguration of Pope Leo the 14th, and you saw it live as it was being transmitted from Rome.
The first thing that got my attention at the inauguration yesterday was that I saw the Nigerian flag in Rome. I saw the Nigerian flag on the side of the road as the Pope made his way towards the St. Peter's Basilica. It was, I repeated it quite a number of times. And even then, after the whole ceremony was done and dusted, I still saw the Nigerian flag, and I saw someone wearing, putting a scarf of the Nigerian flag across, the neck, and the camera there was able to pick it. And I'm almost certain that it wasn't the Nigerian that was holding the cameras or controlling the cameras, whichever way it was. So that was exciting. And one other significant thing here. But this is the first time we're having, to the best of my knowledge, a Muslim democratic leadership in our country. And so for the president to make this, as you said, it's quite significant. So is there a bias in religion and all of that? I think one can say that the coast is clear on that one already. It was also an opportunity for the president to speak with the Catholic Bishops' Conference right there in Rome. When he met them, and he told them that, look, if we use our diversity not for adversity but for prosperity, the country's hope is stability and progress. And guess what? Even the Catholic bishops themselves responded to him, saying that he's always with them, and now that he's come to the Vatican, whenever he's invited for the conference, their conference, it will be something that they will honor. So I think it is something to celebrate, to praise, not about it being a religion or anything, but about knowing that at the end of the day, we are all human. We are all flesh and blood. There is no Christian blood or Muslim blood. There is no Christian flesh or Muslim flesh. We are all one. We're all the same. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, really. Use any platform we have for the very purpose for which we were made, Malpe.
Indeed, Ayo, and I think that at this point we're going to let our viewers listen to some of the things that people on the president's delegation thought the significance of this was for them.
President Bola Tinubu arriving at St. Peter's Square, the Vatican City, for the historic inauguration of Pope Leo XIV. He's led in and joins other world leaders for the event. In front of over 1,000 visitors and Catholic faithful, the Mass is observed, a ceremony of color and deep spiritual significance. Afterwards, the Pope had a private moment with President Tinubu. The President also met with former Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi and the 2023 Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi at the event. Speaking with correspondents afterwards, the President touched on the significance of his visit on national unity.
It's consistent and the true sense of unity in diversity. And I'm greatly honored. We have to continue to work on it. It's a work in progress for the sake of our country and the continent as a whole.
Other members of the delegation also spoke on the symbolism of the visit.
He has shown this solidarity with the millions of people who are of the Catholic faith in Nigeria by attending this Mass, being himself a Muslim.
What he has gone to show is that all of us Nigerians, either we are Christians or Muslims, we are worshiping the same God. And that by honoring the invitation from the Pope to attend this event is to further show Nigerians that we all belong to we are the same people. We may have different religions, we may have different perspectives about God, but we are worshiping one God. And that's what he has shown by coming to this event.
And it changes the perception that Nigeria has this, everlasting sectarian conflict between Christian and Muslim. So it shows that the Vatican, the Papal, can see it fit to invite the president to represent the great country of Nigeria and show the fact that religion, freedom of religion is something that is prevalent and is also recognized by the leadership of Nigeria.
Later in the day, the president met with members of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria who were part of his delegation to Rome. During the meeting, President Tinubu urged Nigerians to use their diversity for the country's stability and rapid development. The president also issued a stirring call to leaders at all levels to work for the betterment of the citizenry. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Let's take a short break for some messages and we'll be back to get on the show.
A quite eventful plenary session in the House of Representatives begins with defections. The National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress leads members of the party, including the Minister of State for the Federal Capital Territory, to witness the defection of 3 members of the House to the party.
Congratulations, my brother. Congrats.
Honorable Oluwole Oke from Osun State defects from the PDP, while Honorable Kabiru Rurum and Honorable Abdullahi Rogo, both from Kano State, defect from the New Nigeria People's Party.
With your leave, Mr. Speaker.
Getting down to the business of the day, an urgent motion on the admittance to errors in the 2025 UTME by the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board is taken as the House calls for calm.
I rise this morning to move a motion on the urgent need to address the anger, confusion and agony that trail the 2025 JAMB examination UTME in Nigeria. Urge the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, JAMB, to establish at least one CBT center in each of the 774 local government areas across the Federation.
The House moves to consider bills scheduled for second reading, one of which seeks to make it compulsory for every Nigerian of legal age to vote in elections.
By making voting a legal obligation, we will instill in the citizens a sense of civic duty and shared responsibility in the governance process.
If we begin to put these structures in place, like as a legislature, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you there will be greater participation of Nigerians in our democratic process, so that they will be part of the decision making, so that they will own the process, so that they will own the decision, so that they will not say it is either this party or that party's decision.
Some lawmakers argue that the citizens have lost confidence in the voting system and also question the authenticity of the voters' register.
Can we, in all honesty, tell ourselves that our voter register is clean? In some constituencies, you find Mike Tyson, who is not a citizen of that place, still on the register till today. When we talk about 30% of voters, 30% of what?
The bill scales second reading, but the next one to increase the maternity leave period for women to 6 months does not.
Many states in Nigeria and many countries have already adopted this 6 months maternity leave period for women. It will just be therefore ideal and proper for us to reflect that in the laws of federation. So in view of the numerous benefits as I enumerated, for those of us who are fathers and who are also looking to become grandparents, I think this amendment is in the interest of our children and grandchildren, even those not yet born.
Already we are not on the good book of you men. I'm sorry to say, but this is what is obtainable. Now, if this bill goes on, people in private sector may say, once you employ a woman, when she's pregnant, she leaves the office for 6 months, and there will be nobody there.
I seek the leave of the House to step down this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the House has continued to amend the Regional Development Commission Acts to expand their directorates. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Well, the potpourri of conversations you heard went on there, and well, the primary reason we're having a discussion this morning, no, it's not about maternity leave, much as I wish it were. It's more about something that has to do with our rights as citizens. Our rights as citizens to ensure that we're part of the democratic process, which is about voting. You know, it's a civic responsibility, we've been told. And now lawmakers are seeking to make it compulsory. Otherwise, you know, you could maybe be penalized for not voting, for not exercising your right as a citizen. Well, this morning, we have two gentlemen in the studio who have divergent opinions on this particular matter. It has caused quite a stir. It's causing quite a controversy. Some people think, hey, it's a right, I can choose to exercise it or not. And some people say, you know, you're not exercising your right affects the generality of the decisions that are being taken. The question will be how. But this morning we have two gentlemen here. Mr. Monday Ubani, a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Marco.
And we also have Samson Itodo, who's the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you. Always a delight to be here.
Okay, well, so this is the conversation, and I know that Yaga Africa has released a statement on this. They think that this is not the way to go with this bill. So tell us why you disagree with, you know, lawmakers looking at penalizing people who do not come out to exercise their right to vote.
The whole concept of penalizing people, it's the biggest problem with this particular bill. Yaga Africa's opposition to the compulsory voting bill isn't opposition to the rationale. The rationale, if you check the explanatory memorandum of that bill, seeks to address large-scale voter apathy. So the problem is voter apathy, the low turnout in our elections. If that is the problem, you cannot solve that problem with imposing compulsory voting in Nigeria. There are several reasons why people are not showing up, you know, to cast their vote. And it's our principled view that recognizing that voting is a right, not voting is also a right. Secondly, that you cannot fix the problem of low turnout on elections by imposing compulsory voting. And on those principles, we reject the provisions of the bill. The approach is an affront on constitutional rights. It undermines the entire foundation of democracy, which is freedom. And then also that the rationale, it's plausible. But there are other things and other ways that you can address voter apathy. But imposing compulsory voting, it's really against constitutional norms and standards. And it's on that ground that we strongly oppose this bill, and we have called for its premature death.
Well, you are talking about freedom, and you say that the only grounds which you have with it is the fact that it seeks to penalize. I want to delve a little, deeper, which is the fact that while voting is a right, we've also been told it's a civic responsibility. Are people allowed to shirk responsibility?
Yes, it's a civic responsibility. It's a duty imposed on you because you're part of this constitutional community. They're called Nigeria. So there are certain duty because they say where there is a right, there is also a duty. But the question is, you cannot use a civic duty to assault on a constitutional right. So if you look at the way it's structured even within the Nigerian Constitution, Section 24 also talks about civic rights and duties. But then if you go to Chapter 4, which deals with fundamental freedoms, those are rights that citizens actually have. And we're not saying you're derogating from a particular civic duty, because not voting itself, keep in mind, is a constitutional right. And so given that that right is recognized and that there's nowhere in our law books that performing this duty is statutorily mandated, I don't think that when citizens don't vote, they are actually negating or violating provisions of our Constitution or even provisions of our Electoral Act. The big question to ask is, we have a problem of low turnout in elections. Why are people not showing up to cast their votes? And there are several reasons. One deals with the quality of governance, because people feel that when they vote leaders into office, leaders use the power that is given to them in trust to oppress the people, and they don't deliver on their campaign promises. So people are asking, why do I show up again to vote if leaders don't fix the problems that they have voted into office to solve? The second point is the lack of trust in the electoral process. Do citizens trust that when they go to cast their votes at elections, that the results that will be announced at the end of the day will be a reflection of the will of the people? Those are the fundamental questions. The third point is, have we as a country ensured that there are mechanisms in place to protect the right to vote? In our country, Maupe, I can't remember the last time you voted in an election, because on the day of elections, you are performing your duty as a vanguard of democracy by covering elections. Same thing applies to security agencies. Same thing to INEC officials across the world. These categories of individuals are given opportunities to vote, either through special voting arrangements or early voting. But as a country, there are a lot of administrative bottlenecks that are placed on the path of voters that makes it difficult for them to cast their vote. So address those administrative bottlenecks and perform and deliver dividends of democracy to the people and inspire trust and confidence in the electorate, and see if we will not record 60-70% turnout in elections.
So let's even start from the bottom, which is the fact that if this law were to pass right away, journalists and security men will be the first to be penalized, because certainly on elections day, for many elections, journalists and security men and those who are observers, etc., they rarely get to exercise their right to vote. So starting from there, would we say that this is a misplacement of looking at the problem and wanting to start with a solution that might not exactly solve it? Because there are so many other reasons why we might be recording this low voter turnout, and it doesn't look like we've addressed all of these other issues.
Yeah, thank you, Malco. I will address this, and then I will also answer some of the issues that my brother Itodo has actually raised. I wrote an article and I made reference to reasonable exemptions. There are those who, under the law, must be exempted. Yeah, if you are saying about punishment, for any offender who refuses or is unable to perform that civic responsibility. So the law must also make those reasonable exemptions. I mean, with regard to journalists and those who may be on duty, or those who, somebody even wrote me an article and said, look, we worship on Saturday, and that is our holiday. So are we all going to be punished if you fail to vote on Saturday? And I said, look, the law must be very reasonable in taking into account those other persons who may be reasonably exempted and who shouldn't be punished. The article I wrote, really provoked conversation and reactions. And I sent it to him. Apparently, Two of us are in the electoral reform committee of the Nigerian Bar Association. He's the co-chair, I'm the chairperson. We are trying to look at the...
We didn't know that before.
Yeah, yes, we are bringing that to your information. We are trying to ensure that what are the really problems that Nigerians encounter in the electoral process. They want to participate. And that is what I got in the reaction. They want to vote. They want to choose their leaders. But the conditions are not conducive enough for them to do that. We have institutional deficiencies. We have a situation where people want to vote. The talks will stop them from voting. Or when they have voted, the result doesn't reflect, the mandate they have actually given to those that they want to lead them. So they want those issues, to be addressed first and foremost, and not issue of penalizing those who refuse or who are unable to vote. My own take is, look, I agree we need electoral reforms. There was issue of beavers, remember, that was introduced in order to check the integrity of the accreditation process, the smart card. Now, was it implemented the way the Act itself has actually made it? The issue of online, the retransmission that the law is also made provision for, do we apply it even with regards to Section 60 of the Electoral Act? Did we do all that? Then there is this issue of, if I have a document that shows the result of an election, I don't need to call any witness anymore. I don't need to call any polling unit agent to come and testify. That document should speak, for it. But then, did we? Even with judicial pronouncement, we are still relying on pre-2022 jurisprudence, in our pronouncement. So Nigerians are now saying, look, if we don't address those issues, so don't penalize us if we refuse to vote. But my take is that, look, the electoral reform should go alongside with the issue of civic responsibility. We should own the process. I am an example. I was voting in Lagos. I said, no, I have to go and begin to see what happened in my state, Abia, because of the bad governance. And I participated from 2019 till date. I gathered all the people and said, we must. This is the candidate we are voting for. And because they believe in me, we have always recorded 100% vote in favor of the person we have actually said this is our candidate. So if you don't play that role, if you don't come out and say, I'm going to remain passive, you abstain, because the process is not right, because the trust is no longer there, because they don't fulfill, then you are giving room for the people to manipulate the electoral process the more against you, and against your future, and against your generation. And so there is danger in encouraging apathy. And that is what that law seeks to address. But we are saying, in addition to addressing the issue of apathy, address those fundamental issues that people have also raised. That if we have electoral act that have amended some of those bad things that happen in the electoral process, and you have not implemented them, then don't penalize me if I fail to come. But I'm saying the danger in allowing that to happen, in allowing apathy to happen, is that the people that will be elected will not be a reflection of the sovereignty of the people. The people must come out. We must all begin to insist on those changes.
So you think that this law
Yes.
should ginger
Yes.
the people to be a part of the process?
And own it and say, look, this is what we want. By the time we vote for any candidate, you have no right whatsoever to change it. You cannot alter it. And that is why the issue of real-life transmission was made as a provision. From the polling unit, you transmit. You don't, because where the manipulation comes at the collection center, they can manipulate, do all manner of things. So the law now says, look, how do we cure that effect? Whenever the result is announced at the polling unit, transmit it. Let it be there. And so nobody can change anything. But it was not affected in 2023, and so people are losing hope. So the danger in people saying, I'm not going to participate, nobody should force me, is that the minority will be one now electing those that will rule the majority. And it's a danger. That is my own concern. I agree with all the things they are saying. Nigerians are really expressing their anger. They are also saying we want to vote, but make the condition very conducive for us. Let there be a reflection of our will, not when we do something else, then a different result, and you want me to come and vote, and you want to penalize me. I am not going to do that. But the danger is that the minority will still be the one electing those that will govern us, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, but don't you think it's a little premature?
Yes.
Then? I mean, if this is how Nigerians feel, don't you think it's a bit premature? Don't you think that there are things that ought to have been done, put in place first? rebuild hope that this is where we're going to. This is what we want. And then when all of that, when many of the bottlenecks have been taken away, the obstacles have been taken away, then you can maybe start to say,
Beautiful
look,
argument.
after we've done this, if you're still not coming out to
Beautiful.
vote, then you could be penalized.
My take is that those two of them should be going hand in hand. Those two of them should be going hand in hand. The issue of electoral reform. If you allow people to abstain and say, wait until the system is fixed, and if they don't fix it, it means that the minority will still be determining those that is going to govern us. And it's dangerous. I'm saying we insist on those electoral reforms. I agree with you. I'm not against any electoral reform, especially as we age towards 2027. We must, effect all those changes that the Act is reflected in 2022, which by interpretation, we are still holding to pre-2022 jurisprudence. No. We should now make it expressly clear that this is the provision of the law that wants to take care of the electoral process and then ensure that the mandate of the people respected. Agree. Then you must also not go and sit idle and say, no, I have to wait until the system is right before I come to exercise my civic responsibility. That's the danger. If you do that, then the system will be owned by those minorities and they will keep on manipulating the system. So we must all come out. That's my own take. We must all come out. As much as we're insisting on electoral reform, we must also make sure that that civic responsibility, we are not abstaining from it. That's my take. And I don't know whether I have made sense. I know that people will be angry. Oh, Mr. Bani, what are you talking about? But what I'm saying is that we must not abstain. Abstention is not the best for us.
I see the point you're trying to make there, Samson. I doubt very strongly that you can fault that argument, that this is actually to try and get the people ginger. That if you wait behind and say, oh, I'm protesting, this is my form of protest, the reforms are not going to happen automatically, and that people need to take ownership for those kinds of things to really take hold.
Absolutely. I think that we need to make a decision whether we want to be a democracy or we want a different form of democracy. If we claim to be a constitutional democracy, the whole principle of freedom is central. That's what distinguishes democracy, at least one cardinal feature of a democratic system of government that distinct it from another form of government. Democracy itself is hinged on freedom, and is that people have the political autonomy to decide and choose. They can participate, and we must recognize that not participating is a form of participation itself, is an exercise of freedom, and we need to recognize that there's what there's what is called the sanctity of choice. That if you coerce choice, that choice becomes tainted. You cannot say that in a coerced environment that the choice that emanates or evolves out of that can be a reflection of the will of the people. That is what Brazil has taught us. That is what Egypt has taught us. Because these are countries that also practice compulsory voting, and they try to enforce it. And it has been a tool used by authoritarian regimes because it defies democratic principles. So we are making a value and a principle-based argument because we claim to be a democracy. If we choose to be something else, we would shift our argument. But if you say that we are a democracy, then we need to recognize that people have a right, and that part of that right is not coming out to vote. But I understand.
Yeah, does it also take into cognizance? Yes, while that those arguments are very valid in terms of constitutional democracy, and underlying all of that is freedom. When someone say freedom of choice, freedom to choose whichever candidate, you're not being shown whoever it is, to vote for. But at the end, but you are saying that even the decision to vote should be left to the person who wants to vote.
Voluntary commitment.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, does it take into cognizance the level of development of a country? Are these matters that that are important when we also look at constitutional democracy?
Absolutely. These matters are important. It looks at the context. Yes, you look at advanced democracy, and people, if you look at countries like Australia, and even some parts of Argentina and some parts of Austria that implement compulsory voting, yes, these are to a large extent advanced countries. They have the institutions, what you call agencies of protection in a democratic setting, that ensures the validity and the integrity of the process. There is also a commissariat level of political literacy and political mobilization. These factors are there. In our own context, and I completely agree with the erudite Leonard Silk on the point he made about the participation. I think we agree that there's a great need for citizens, to participate, in the process, because their liberation, their development is hinged on how well they participate in the electoral process.
Sorry to interrupt your thoughts. And this is very important because in recent times we've been saying how quite a significant number of Nigerians have been romanticizing, authoritarian rule. We've seen them, talking very strongly about what's happening in Burkina Faso. So I don't know whether, you can relate that, with the point you're also trying to make about where we are in our level of development.
I think the reason why people are either clamoring or, glorifying authoritarian regimes just hinges on the fact that the problem isn't democracy. The problem is our practice of democracy. And the people who are compromising democratic institutions are the politicians, are different actors, including citizens, also play a role. And that's why you say when you have an uninformed citizenry, they pose the greatest threat to democracy, because the choices that they make at elections, if it's driven by other factors and other considerations, if it's not driven by a sense of a common good, if you're not electing leaders who have the competence, the character, and the capacity to lead, and you have other considerations shaping your political choices, then you pose a threat. But a lot of this, is also powered by disinformation. And I dare say that people are concerned that democracy or political leadership isn't delivering on certain goods and services. And so they are asking themselves fundamental questions about why is it that we say that we are blessed with so much natural resources, yet we are the poverty capital of the world. People cannot reconcile the fact that we are a country that has both human, resources, but we're not making the required investment in our human capital. People are asking questions that we are budgeting trillions of naira for education. Where is this money going to? People are asking questions. We have done what? We've removed fuel subsidy, but we still can't account for whether or not these subsidies have been removed and where are the resources being plugged into. They are fundamental questions. And so when people ask these questions, they are simply saying that, yes, we appreciate democracy. And Afrobarometer has told us that Africans, including Nigerians, clamor for democracy. It's just that the type of democracy we practice is the one that they have problems with. And it's one that does not respect the rights of citizens. It's one where political leaders use power to oppress the people. And that is not their own sense of democracy. So I totally agree. Yes, people should participate. We have to encourage them. But one thing we cannot do is to compel them to participate, because if we do so, we will be undermining their rights. And I dare say that compulsory voting will not solve the problem of voter apathy.
Well, at this point, the conversation is certainly getting more interesting. At this point, we take a break. When we come back, Ayo will certainly be coming in with his questions. Please stay with us.
Thank you for staying with us. Let me take the first question to Dr. Ubani right there in our Abuja studio. Compulsory voting, of course, as you have argued, back and forth in the studio right there. But a good number of people will be wondering, how about some other things that needed to be made compulsory first to show good faith to Nigerians that indeed, if we do this, we'll get this better? For instance, what are the compulsory KPIs for government officials that are elected by the people to ensure that they get the right things done? Where are they? Where is the compulsory social investment that needs to be made in the lives of the people? Where is compulsory taxation? Because it will seem like some people believe that, there are some people who still do not pay taxes and there is no compulsion on them. It will seem like the laws are weak to get some governance initiatives done. So why this now?
Very intelligent question. There are other issues, Nigerians are also clamoring that the government should, as much as possible, make compulsory. I totally agree with you. But this particular law is addressing one aspect of all the major problems we have in the country. And these things is, gradually. Of course, the tax reform bill, I'm sure you're aware that the issue of tax is being addressed by the National Assembly. I'm totally in agreement with Nigerian that there are many issues, that is actually holding us back, especially the electorate themselves that have actually most time exercised this franchise. They will be under the sun, under the rain. At the end of 4 years, they don't get anything in terms of return on investment. So many issues. But this particular bill, Ayo, is addressing one particular problem, issue of voter apathy. You do the statistics. I don't know whether issue of registered voters, this number is accurate, or the statistics is accurate. But the point is that every year, every 4 years when we go out to vote, we record less than 30% or 30% voters turnout. It shows that it's a trend. And these people have come out. How do we address this trend? They felt, look, let's make this civic responsibility not an option, but something that we will have to take, a choice and ensure, we own it and produce leaders. Because the moment the minority produce the people that govern us, it's a dangerous trend. And they are trying to address it. Now, I know there are sentiments, there are issues, issue of deal with electoral reforms, deal with the issue of retransmission. When we say, look, this result must be transmitted from it should be there. We should not hear of any glitch. It must be addressed. And I'm sure that the new amendment law, he knows that we are still speaking, with the members in the National Assembly, that these are issues we want them to be really compulsory in the Electoral Act. The issue of beavers, it must be compulsory. The issue of when you have document and you have tendered it before the court doesn't require any other person to come and speak to that document because so far it shows the result. We don't need any other witness. So these are issues. Address them alongside, yes.
Perhaps the issue is let Nigerians even feel the impact of the people that they have employed over the years first. That's perhaps one of the sentiments. But let me ask Mr. Etodo, sitting right there next to you. Now, you put out a couple of statements, a couple of documents, and one of them has this slide on voters' turnout in Nigerian elections between 1999 and 2023. The last time we had the highest was in 2023, beg your pardon, 2003, when we had about 69% voter turnout. Now, but progressively what has happened is we have an increasing number of voters, but a progressively decreasing voter turnout over the years. But guess what? INEC spends the same amount of money they need to spend to print all of the voting materials. That's a waste. And as at the last election, we had 27% of 93.5 million voters come out to vote. And INEC printed voting materials for all of them. And of course, you know the budget for that better than I do. So isn't this another way of addressing the wastages, or you are recommending that we should also reduce the amount we spend on voting materials, Mr. Etodo?
Well, thanks. So when you look, there are three issues involved. And the first question is, you can see, yes, the budget for elections is increasing because when INEC prepares budget for elections, it prepares budget based on how much is spent per voter. Because a Nigerian voter in today's Nigeria is entitled to a permanent voter's card, is entitled to 5 ballot papers, in an election, especially in a general election. You have the presidential, you have 2 National Assembly elections in states where you have governorship elections, and then you have State House of Assembly elections. So that's 5 ballot papers in all. That is printed by taxpayers' money. So when you check for the 2023 elections, Nigeria as a country, we produced over 450 million sheets of papers that were used for our ballot papers. Same thing also applies to result sheets in those polling units. Yes, when voters don't show up at elections, especially in the last election, where you had only 27% of people show up, the other 67%, the ballot papers for those 67% actually got to waste. And that's millions of naira that actually went to waste because INEC budgets based on the number of people who are on the voters register, not on those who actually collected their permanent voters card. And this is why we have to persuade the voters to see how their non-participation comes to the state with a cost. We just need to put that out to voters, and we've been very vocal about this. The point being made is that participation in elections is a voluntary commitment that people need to make. We need to address some of those structural issues that impede on the right of voters to cast their ballot. We've talked about this, whether it's early voting, whether issues about trust, because you can compel voters to show up if you don't fix the question about trust, if you don't fix the issues relating to election manipulation, if you don't fix the question about INEC's independence, all you would simply have is tainted electoral outcomes that are not reflective of the will of the people. And that cannot confer political legitimacy. Because when you introduce coercion, you then cannot say that the outcome of those elections are legitimate. And that's the point. That's why the sanctity of choice is critical in this discussion. We're not saying that we are opposed to the rationale. The rationale is plausible. It's a welcome development that the National Assembly actually sees this as a problem. And our proposal is that you need to address this because they are building blocks that need to be in place before you can talk about compulsory voting.
So you think that we can still go to compulsory voting, just not now?
No, I don't think we should even discuss compulsory voting because it defies democratic values and principles.
So the countries, sorry to interrupt you, but the examples which you have then said, because you've set a number of bad examples, I mean countries where it hasn't worked and has produced very terrible outcomes, but we still have countries that identify as democratic but practice compulsory voting.
Well, if you say Australia,
yes.
The former chair of the Australian Commission, Tom Rogers, sits with me on the board of International IDEA. And I was in Australia recently. And I tell you, you cannot compare the electoral system in Australia with Nigeria because the institutions, the election management body, is independent, and the credibility of Australian elections cannot be called to question in most instances.
Yeah, but it doesn't remove the fact that citizens are compelled.
No, because they trust, the levels of trust are high.
Okay.
We have not fixed the fundamental problems. You want to compel participation in a climb where they weaponize. There's a weaponization
so
of
we should fix that first.
Yeah. Those are foundational issues that you should fix.
So we should fix the foundational issues.
There are things that have to be in place because in the field of, and Leonard Silk knows that in the field of legislative governance, before you introduce a law, you need to ask yourself 3 questions. What mischief exists that it seeks to cure? Is there a lacuna? And then secondly and thirdly is whether you need more money. And if you put this bill to these 3 tests, it doesn't meet any.
Okay, quickly, 30 seconds.
Yes, don't give me that. He gave me more.
Yeah, because we're already about to go.
The point remains that we can fix the electoral reforms alongside with ensuring that people perform their civic responsibility. It's very important. The moment you allow people to now have a choice not to come, it means that minority will still keep on electing leaders that govern. It's a dangerous trend. We shouldn't allow it to happen at all.
Well, gentlemen, I know that this conversation will certainly go on the floor of the National Assembly, and I think it's important that citizens are aware that this conversation is out there. So, depending on how you feel, please reach out to your legislators and tell them strongly just how you feel about it. We have to thank you both for enlightening us on this issue. Monday Obani is the senior advocate of Nigeria, and Samson Itodo is the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you, gentlemen.
Always a delight. Thank you.
Well, that's how we wrap up Monday's edition of Sunrise Daily. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Business Morning is next after these messages.